technical difficulties that I didn't like starting the webinar, but we are live and we've got a great webinar in place for all of you today. My name is Jeff Johnson. I'm the president of MSP Success. We've also got Rob Patterson on here. Rob heads up TMT's peer groups and Peter Kujawa. So Peter's our guest on here today. He heads up service leadership at IT Nation. And we're talking a lot about of what service leadership does is pulling together a lot of data, or one part of what they do, pulling a lot of data together from the MSP industry and putting it into actionable data that you can take a look at and be able to figure out, how do I improve my business? How do I get better in revenue operations? And a big focus of what we're going to be talking about today, something that hopefully everyone really likes, is how do you become more profitable in your business? And what's the characteristics of MSPs that are the most profitable and in the top quartile of profitability? And what does that look like compared to other MSPs? And a hint to it, as you would probably imagine, is that it makes a difference between a business that you might as well go and go work for someone else versus a business that is thriving, that's profitable, that's bringing in revenue, that's growing here, and that you can predictably be able to provide for everyone in the company, and even ultimately sell the company, perhaps, if that's your exit strategy there. So, Peter, welcome onto the call today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate being here, Jeff, Rob.
All right. Well, we got a lot of good data in here. I will mention for everyone is that I'm going to be watching the Q&A. So if you do have questions as we're going along, just pop that into the questions here. I'll be watching that. I'll make sure that we get your questions answered. We've got plenty of time here, but a lot of data to be able to get to. And I know Rob and I have looked at all of it too, and we've got a ton of questions for you to be able to dive in as well. So, Peter, I think you got some slides here. Why don't you go ahead and share that? And then I'll let you get started on that first one.
Sure. So the occasion today, we always have data, as you know. We present every quarter. Our benchmarking clients from all over the world go in, as you mentioned, and enter all of their income statement, their balance sheet data, operations data, and we run that data and we give them back reporting that they can log into that shows how they did compared to their selves previous quarters, and some 8-quarter charts showing trending, but also how they did compared to the top quartile in the industry. So for us, the top quartile is based on profitability. We want to know who's running the most profitable shops, because generally speaking, they're the ones who are doing the right things right, and they do it consistently. So we get all this data every quarter, and once a year we take that data, put it into a light bedtime reading report. That's this year I think it came out to about 280 pages. But we analyze 7 different business models in the industry. The 2 largest data samples we have are MSPs and VARs, and we have a really specific definition of what those are. We'll cover that in a second. But so our
Peter frozen for you.
I think we got Peter frozen here.
He was just getting to the good stuff.
That's the tease right there.
That's it.
With it. So we'll work on getting Peter back on here.
Yeah, it's funny. Work with Paul Sissel a lot. You guys, a lot of it in the TMT community would know him. He also does a lot of work with service leadership. But Paul's got a way of having many slides and lots of data. So where he said that this report, what did he say, 238 pages, is not uncommon in service leadership. It's pretty exhaustive detail and benchmarking. So the fact that he's got a handful of slides to summarize this is going to be pretty interesting of what Peter decides to highlight here.
Yep.
He's back.
All right, we got you back, Peter.
joys of live broadcasting.
Always smooth.
Give me a second here.
We were just talking about how great that is that you take 200 pages and get it into 5 slides.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll hit on a few of these. So, um, all right. So hopefully this time the gremlins of broadcasting don't get the better of us. We'll keep going.
Yep.
So outside of our report, just for context, this is what Q1 looked like in our benchmarking for MSPs. So to give everybody an idea, when we talk about top quartile, that's the green line there. So you had to have at least 16.1% adjusted EBITDA to get into the best in class. The average was 22.7%. So there's a whole bunch of MSPs, in other words, who are doing better than 22.7% profitability. Contrast that when you go down to the median and go down to the bottom quartile, the entry point for the bottom quartile, 4.4%, but the average for the bottom quartile was a loss of 1.6%. So you've got a bunch of MSPs that are doing really well right now. And we'll show you the industry overall is doing well. You should be doing well right now. But at the same time, 11% of MSPs are losing money in Q1, and which is better than it was. It was 18% in Q4, and a couple of years ago, it was about 28, 29% of MSPs losing money. So we are doing better. That's improving, but still, it's too hard of a business. You run an MSP, you're working really hard. It's a stressful business to run. I ran one for 11 years, and it's too much risk. I mean, if you're running one of these businesses, you're not making money, or you're making single-digit profitability, you're missing the opportunity, and you're working too hard for too little return. So our top quartile that we want to really understand what it is that they're doing operationally that's driving those results for them. The other thing you'll notice that's interesting on here is a lot of times I hear feedback, especially when I go into peer group meetings, that it's either be profitable or grow, that I have to sacrifice profitability for the sake of growth. And our data says that's a false choice. The best in class every quarter almost since in the years that I've been here has grown the fastest, and the bottom quartile has grown the slowest. So, and everybody's spending a lot of money to grow. That's not the issue. But the best in class is just running their business in a different way. So they're both growing faster and they're more profitable.
So explain that just real quick, of just to make sure that we all understand that on these the two right-hand columns that you have here. What does that show me? Is that showing us the average growth quarter over quarter, or is that an annualized growth from Q4 to Q1? Kind of what is that number?
Yes, so the MR4Q means most recent 4 quarters. So
Got it.
the growth rate for those MSPs. So what this is saying, if you look at it, is to be top quartile, I had to be generating at least 16.1% profitability. The average was 22.7. So
Mhm.
of that top quartile, the average 4 quarter growth rate on total revenue was 10.7%. The average growth rate on recurring revenue was 13.3%. So one key thing, part of the reason that they're growing recurring revenue faster is that their customer attrition rate's about 50% of what the bottom quartile is.
Mhm.
And another difference is the best in class they make the decision usually on what customers are going to be attrited. The bottom quartile tends to be fired. And so best in class is going out, and maybe for every 3 or 4 new customers they're bringing in, they might be selectively opting out one of their customers who's not profitable or is a troubled customer. But the bottom quartile is losing customers at about 2 times the rate regardless.
Yeah, so they're losing customers at 2 times the rate, and then they're just holding on. I would imagine on that, just the way that you're saying that, they're holding on to everyone, and it's taken out that selectivity of being able to identify, hey, who are the bumpy customers that are causing us to drive down profitability, but I got to keep them because otherwise maybe I'm having to lay off staff or do things because I've already lost customers at that point.
Yeah, if they even know. The
Yeah.
best in class are really good at measuring their customer profitability. Most of the best in class will do that every quarter. They'll stack rank their customers on gross margin. They're able to get really good reporting on that. You can get some of that out of PSA. You can get some of that. MSP CFO has some really, really good granular reporting on that. We don't have any ownership interest in it. I know those folks, and they align with our data practices really well. And their customer level reporting on gross margins really good. So if you're best in class, you're probably looking every quarter, you should be, at your customers and saying, these are my best customers, these are my A customers, these are my B, my C, and my D. And then do something about it. Go out to your D customers and figure out, why are they D customers? Are they underpriced and we need to significantly increase their price? Are they running some tech that's out of our tech stack that's taking us a lot of time to support? We can fix that, right? It's really, the key is first and foremost understanding which customers are your lowest gross profit customers, and then moving forward after that.
Hey Peter, this increased in recurring revenue. We're not just talking new logo here, right? We're talking about if you have great account management and you're doing that ranking, it's kind of squeezing more out of that or becoming more profitable or finding more dollars there as well. So,
Yeah, you're increasing recurring revenue. There's a few different ways that we count as organic growth. So number one would be, yeah, you're adding a new logo. That's the most obvious form of new revenue, new recurring revenue, and new organic growth. But also, if you've priced your managed services on a per user basis, and certainly you should be, as your customers are adding employees, that's also organic growth. You're adding new revenue, recurring revenue that way. So the best in class, they tend to bring in better quality customers. And one of the characteristics of those customers is that those businesses grow faster. So if I hitch my wagon to some customers that are growing faster, my growth rate's going to be faster as well. Uh, Also, price increases. If I'm doing price increases as I should be every year on my customers, including on a multi-year contract, another best practice, I'm going to see that growth. So there's a lot of sources for it, certainly, that can be added in. I might be adding new offerings into my fully managed stack and increasing the price proportionally to cover those and add appropriate gross margin. All of those things are going to fuel recurring revenue growth.
thank you.
One other thing, just real quick on that. Explain on that bottom one. You're saying there's only about 20% churn in the top quartile.
Yeah.
How is that churn calculated down there? Like, what is that 20% piece?
Well, we look we haven't done this for a couple of years, but we've gone in and looked repeatedly and looked at who's in the best in class. And what we find is that the same names are there quarter in and
Got
quarter
it. Got
out.
it.
And so it makes sense if once you figure out how to run your business in a way that delivers best in class profitability and higher growth rates, why would you change how you're running your business, right? You're going to continue to do those things so that you can continue that kind of success. The bottom quartile folks come in and out all the time because you can't swim underwater forever. You're going to have to pop up above water or you're going to go away. And so bottom quartile folks will typically see those folks get better. They'll have maybe a quarter where they'll crack into the median, then they'll go back into bottom quartile. They'll do some things to try to financially engineer their way out of it for a quarter. And those are just not best practices. They're not sustainable things that drive profitability.
Yeah, so just I think a lot of people might not understand one piece of that is that when you're looking at this, and correct me if I'm wrong on it, is that when you're looking at each of the reporting, so when you're looking at this on a quarter by quarter basis, that top quartile could theoretically be different companies. It's not the same companies that are in that top quartile every quarter or every reporting period. But what you're seeing is that that top quartile doesn't change a whole lot. It could theoretically, because you're taking a snapshot every time, but it doesn't change because, as you say here, once you learn how to ride a bicycle, you don't fall off very often and you fall less severely. So you might every once in a while, some of those in the green might jump down to that yellow group, but it's
Sure.
not very often. There's not a whole lot of churn down into that area.
No, that's exactly right. That's 100% correct. So theoretically, we could have all new companies in the best in class every quarter because every quarter we run the sample, but we just don't see that.
Yep. All right. Awesome. That's great.
So the one of the key takeaways is that it's worth it to invest the time and to figure out how to work your business differently. Financially, what this chart shows, this is the rest of the charts will show are straight out of the annual report. This is going way back, and we benchmarked 10 different business models. As I said, MSPs and VARs are two largest, and the definition of those is really specific. It's 60% or more of your revenue coming from recurring and non-recurring product, then you're product centric, aka a VAR. If you have 40% or more of your revenue coming from services, then we look at what kind of services. Is it infrastructure services? Is it app dev services? And within those, is it project service, managed service, uh, TS, which is break fix? And then we're going to categorize you based on that, based on your largest revenue stream. So that's what you see across the bottom. But the point of this slide is if you go from median to best in class, not even going from bottom quartile to best in class, just going from median to best in class, look at the difference in profitability over time. That on average, you're going to be 2.5 times more profitable. And so if you look at MSPs, about halfway over, it's a little less than that, but it's still 2.3x the profitability. And that's just going from median to best in class. So the point is to every MSP out there, figure this out, invest the time, make the tough decisions. You're already working hard. The payoff is worth it. And I get a little bit of pushback sometimes. I think maybe some of this is generational. Some of the younger generation will be, hey, all you guys, you talk about profit too much. It's not all about profit. It's about taking care of customers and it's about employees and growing a business. And yeah, I agree. I've been CEO of a couple of companies. I've grown, I've done turnarounds. Um, but being profitable, especially at a top quartile level, is way more fun if you're going to do all the work and have all the stress. And it's going to lead to a much better outcome when you ultimately sell the business. And every business ultimately will sell, whether it's to an ESOP or to somebody else or to your management team or whatever. Um, it's worth it over the long haul, and it opens up a lot of options in the short term to invest in the business, to do some things that you take some risks that you might not otherwise be willing to take. The payoff is definitely worth it.
Yeah, and I'll point out on it here too, because there's just a lot on this slide here. This is over a 16-year period, 16, 17-year period that you've got on here that's demonstrating. So this is not just a 4-quarter snapshot to be able to show this or an anomaly. This is over time of what this looks like.
Yeah, we've been benchmarking. This year is actually Service Leadership's 20th year of benchmarking. So the data set that we have, you can argue with us on a lot of things, but it's pretty hard to argue with us on any of the data set just based on the depth of what we have. So,
Hey, Peter,
uh,
while you're saying that, what's the composition of the companies that are entering? What's the profile of companies? Is there certain shape, size? Like, is there, when you look at it, how many companies are out there that you're typically getting this in the survey and the numbers?
yeah, so we don't disclose our individual sample size breakdowns. So we have thousands of subscribers. I'll just leave it at that.
Sure.
But we I'll hold the question on what they look like. There's a slide that I
Okay.
have that shows some different size ranges, and I can answer that probably better at that slide.
Okay. Sounds good.
Um,
Can I ask,
so,
excuse me,
yeah,
can I ask this sort of a 101 question? So we're talking about best in class and we understand, by quartile and profitability, but is there some other quick recap or brief overview you can give of what does best in class even mean outside of what we're looking at here in terms of, maturity or discipline or
yeah. So for us, best in class means one thing, and that is you're in the top quartile of profitability. We mentioned that it's adjusted EBITDA. We only do one adjustment. I know there's a lot of adjustments out there that can really monkey around with your bottom line. For us, there's only one adjustment we do. We take your EBITDA and then we do an adjustment to normalize for owner compensation. About 80% of MSP owners underpay themselves in wages, and they use distributions to make up for that, which is perfectly fine, perfectly legal, some tax advantages to doing it that way, but it distorts your profitability. And so we do an adjustment that looks at what did the owner pay themselves in wages and what would it cost you to replace that owner if the owner was hit by a bus or won the lottery or whatever saying you want to use? If you had to go out on the street and hire a CEO to replace that owner, what would the cost be to do that? So we look at it, were you overpaid or underpaid, and we do an adjustment, and that's it. And so for us, there are 80 different KPIs that we extrapolate out of the best in class. We're looking at how well run their service factory is, their gross margins by line item. We're looking at what are they spending on SG&A, what are they spending on marketing, sales, all of those things. But for us, what we care about first and foremost is how profitable are they? That's what's going to determine the sample. Now, what makes those companies different? There's a lot of different characteristics. I have a couple of slides I'll hit on with that, but those inputs are not what we base best in class on. What we base it on is the profitability, and then we extract all of those different KPIs and performance characteristics out. Does that make sense?
yes, got it. Thank you.
So what we um, what we also want to really emphasize is that this is a great time to own an MSP. We've looked at, and you can see it here on the slide, we've looked at profitability trends going way back. This slide goes back to 2008. And you can see we're in the middle of the best 5 year run we've ever had as an industry. And it's a little deceptive. It looks like 2004 was a down year compared to 2020 and 2021, et cetera. But in reality, 2020 and 2021 had COVID relief money in them. They had PPP and all the other money that was getting pumped out there. And that added about 1.6% to the EBITDA numbers that you see in 20 and 21. So if you pull that 1.6% out, 2024 was right there. Um, Now we're definitely seeing some slowdown in revenue growth. There's a lot of things going on there we could talk about, but overall, this is a great time to own an MSP. So, Jeff, you asked the question about size ranges and distribution. The average MSP today is around 20 to 25 employees, somewhere around 6 million of revenue, 6, 7 million, depending on what you're looking at. And we benchmark everybody from small 1, 2 employee MSPs to employees MSPs now that are in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and we have some businesses now between our VARs and MSPs that are in the $1 billion range. So we're benchmarking companies of all shapes and sizes. What's interesting is, and we show it on this slide, a, a really common thing that I hear is that my MSP is the wrong size to be best in class. And we typically hear this from bottom quartile folks, that once I get to this other size, I will then have the advantages of that size, and then I will magically become more profitable and more successful as a business. So what this slide shows is that that is not true. That sub million, 1 to 3 million, 3 to 6, 6 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 25, 25 to 50, and greater than 50 million of revenue. And the green is the percentage of that revenue size that's best in class. Red is the percentage of it that's bottom quartile. And you'll notice that every single size range has at least 22% of that size that's best in class. And at least 22% in every size range is bottom quartile. So ultimately, there is no magical size to running your business. It's all about the decisions that you're making at whatever size that you are. And when I talk to the big, really big guys, they think the small guys have an advantage because the owner's doing sales and wearing a bunch of hats and you don't have as much back office expense. And the small guys think if you get big, you're going to have all these advantages of scale and sales teams and all of this additional muscle in the business. But they're both, I mean, yeah, there's advantages to and disadvantages to every size, but at the end of the day, you can be best in class profitable at any size range. So this was a slide that we added to last year's report to prove what we've been saying anecdotally for years and years and years.
And it's interesting that the one thing that did stand out, and it's not a huge number, but it's a noticeable, is that the sub million has a greater likelihood of being in that bottom quartile, which makes complete sense because they're a lot less mature business, and so that ability to focus on the things that's going to make them more profitable just sometimes aren't there yet. You don't know sometimes what you don't know at that size of company, or sometimes it's with that revenue size, or at least what I've seen with that revenue size, there's the wrong focus of where they're putting their time and effort in running and growing the business.
It can be. I
Yeah, it
think
can be.
the other factor that you get in the sub million is if you lose one decent customer, you can go from being best in class to being bottom quartile at that
Mhm.
size. If you make one or two over hire decisions and you get a little bloated in your payroll, you can just by hiring one person too many, you can pretty quickly impact your profitability. The other factor is usually when you're sub million, you're a lot less discerning on your new customers coming in. You're just trying to build your business. So you're out there bringing in customers that you know probably aren't paying you what they should be, or they're maybe not willing to go on your tech stack like they should be. Some of those things,
Sure.
but you're going to take them because you need the revenue and
Yeah.
establish it. But yeah, so yes, but even there, 22.7% are best in class. So
Yeah. You
um,
see that little dip in that $6 to $10 million range.
good
Uh,
eye.
and
Yes.
I see your note on here there, but just talk about that with that 6 to 10 million range and what's happening there that potentially causes that to dip slightly.
Yeah, around that size, you're running a real business. When you've gotten your MSP's gotten up to that 6, 7 million. And so at that point, the owner can't keep doing everything, or the owner and maybe one other key employee. You see MSPs around that size, if they're going to scale up and grow, they probably are adding a sales manager around that size. They're
Hmm.
probably adding a finance manager or controller. But they're having to add some professional leadership into their business to be able to get them over the hump to ramp up into that next size range. And so those investments cost some money. So noticeably at that size, you'll notice that yeah, the best in class dips down a little bit, but the bottom quartile doesn't increase. So you see some of those best in class folks make some of those investments. They dip a little bit into the median, and then they come right back out of it. That as they grow out of that and they've made those investments, now they can achieve some scale and start to grow into that 10 million plus range.
Peter, what are some of the most dangerous trends or bad habits that you're seeing amongst the bottom quartile, the underperforming MSPs?
Oh gosh, how much time do we have? Um, there's so many. Let's put it a different way. What are some of the things that the that the best in class do better. Um, Probably the thing that I see the most with the best in class is with us, they don't argue with the data. They look at what drives performance and they're going to adjust their business to do the right things. The bottom quartile, and they're going to move faster. The bottom quartile, generally speaking, tends to be a little bit more obstinate. They have their theories and they're gonna stick with those theories even in the face of what they can see clearly is not working. And they're gonna wait longer to react. One of an example of that is when we've seen recessions, the best in class has actually done really well during recessions because they react a lot faster. They start to see some of these trends on their revenue, and they're going to make some decisions on expenses and maybe headcount, and they're going to do those things much faster. The bottom quartile, they're going to wait a couple of quarters, see how things shake out. But also just general discipline. The best in class is really focused on a specific customer profile, and they're not going to sell to somebody who doesn't fit that profile. If my target customer profile is 25 to 75 employees, and some 250 employee organization comes knocking, I'm not gonna take that call. I might talk to them, but that's not a good fit for me. If some 10 employee org comes knocking, I know that's not a good fit for me. I didn't build my factory for that. Um, so the best in class is really disciplined. They're really disciplined and they're onboarding to rip and replace and get their tech stacks in. The bottom quartile, they're just willing to do things that the best in class is not willing to do. They're much more disciplined.
Very cool.
So
Is there George here in the audience was asking here, how would I, and I'm going to rephrase this of what he had, but how do you, if you're sitting out there and you're looking at all this data, what does someone do to compare of how their company stands in comparison here? And mainly we're talking about profitability here, so maybe talk about it from a profitability standpoint. I think it's looking at yourself even on that prior slide of where you're at, or even the overall slides and seeing where your profitability lands.
yeah, I would look at a couple of things. Let me see what we have. This is our last slide. So
Yeah,
let me speak to a couple of things in answering that question.
sure.
When somebody starts to benchmark, I mean, my first recommendation in a self-serving plug is go to service-leadership.com. That's our website. You can buy our annual report there, and it's going to give an incredible amount of information. And you can take that information and compare your business in a lot of these KPIs and gross margin areas, and really understand what the industry is doing today. But if you really want to know how you're doing, sign up for benchmarking. It's not that expensive. ConnectWise bought us about 4 years ago, and our pricing, you can get our stuff bundled into some bundles. Our pricing's about 70% less than it was back
Mhm.
when we were service leadership as a standalone. So any size company really can afford our product, and it's going to pay back many, many times over. And that's going to give you a really granular view on how you're doing compared to the best in class. But I'll give you two things. One is when somebody signs up and starts benchmarking, pretty common that somebody will say, "Hey, Peter, can you take a look at our data? I just want to have what do you see when you look at our data?" So the first thing I'll do is I'll look at their profitability. And back to this slide, I'm going to look and see where they are. Are they at 3%? Are they at 20%? And I just want to know from a baseline and get a sense of how this business is doing. Okay. The second thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at their service multiple of wages. I don't have a slide on this, but the service multiple of wage is the relationship between your total service wages and your total service revenue. And so I'm going to look at your service multiple of wages, and it's going to tell me a whole bunch of things about your business. Okay, it's going to tell me probably, are you charging enough? Are your people utilized enough? Are you hiring with the right skill set mix in your business? but your service multiple of wages to be profitable, best in class profitable, you should be at least at a 2.5x. So if I take all of my serviced wages, and those are fully loaded wages, so benefit load and everything, my techs, my engineers, my service managers, even my VCIOs, my project managers, anybody who's doing post-signature new customer onboarding and management of my customer base for services. I'm going to put all of those wages in one bucket, and I'm going to put my managed services, my break fix, my project services in another bucket. And I'm going to look at how big is the revenue bucket compared to the wages bucket. And again, I should be getting at least $2.5 of services revenue for every dollar of services wages in that service bucket. Bottom quartile, I tend to see about a 1.9 or lower. And so I know right away how well run their service factory is by looking at that number. So there's a lot of things. That's one of about 80 different KPIs, but it's my favorite for getting a really quick read on how the business is doing. One of the things, last thing on the slide, one of the things that fuels differentiated gross margin today is if you look at this is a breakdown on service gross margin by different line items. So T&M, with old break fix, project, managed service, and shared service, which shared service is hosting on your own infrastructure. We don't see as much of that these days as we used to. But look at the difference between the bottom quartile and the best in class on break fix. Okay. Look at the huge difference on projects. Projects are a drain on gross margin for MSPs, and they're even a drain for the best in class. But I would greatly prefer being at 36% gross margin on projects to being at negative 0.6% as the bottom quartile is today. I mean, literally, they're losing money on every dollar of projects that they're billing out. And so this is a major impact for a lot of MSPs' profitability. And so if there's a takeaway today, it would be focusing on driving project service gross margin.
Why is that? Or what are the contributing factors to why they're, on the face of it, you're delivering a project, you're charging for it, you somehow should be able to make a profit on that. Like, what's the
You would
mismanagement?
think. However, the biggest there's a bunch of levers that you pull on to deliver better gross margin on projects. Number one is pricing. Have I priced my labor rates in those projects high enough to cover what I'm putting in? Your project engineers are your most expensive techs in your org. Are you pricing their labor rate high enough? Second, are you really capturing all the cost of that project in the quote? Are you building in project management cost? Are you building in the cost of quoting that project? How good is your change order management? Are you really capturing all of the things that are coming as you go forward? But the biggest one is utilization. Best in class utilization, I don't have the slide, it's in our report, but best in class utilization is about 73%. Bottom quartile is about 48%. Okay, so if you're not billing your project team, you still have the cost. The cost still hits your gross margin and you're still having to pay for those folks. MSPs have a huge, huge advantage that the best ones take advantage of. And that is your managed service client relationships give you a good glimpse into the next 2 to 3 quarters of upcoming projects. You should be able to project manage in a way that keeps your engineers busy all the time. Okay, so my advice to MSPs is only do projects for your managed service clients. Stick to them, keep your engineers maximum busy doing those projects. If you see a gap that's coming up next month on the calendar where they're not going to be as busy, pull a project forward from a quarter or a month later, whatever. But you have a huge advantage as an MSP that a VAR doesn't have and Project Shop doesn't have, so take advantage of it.
What's interesting, and it kind of stands out on this slide here, is you pointed out that with the professional services, and that's obvious unless kind of looking at it of where unless there was just a missing red bar, then that one's not like the others there. But surprisingly, with managed services, it's a much narrower change from top quartile to bottom quartile.
It
Anything
is.
on
The
that?
spread is
Yeah,
on here. It's not like projects, but
yeah.
still
I mean, it's still
41 to
seven
48.
7.7%
Yeah,
difference.
yeah, and
Yeah,
that's about a 15% difference in profitability. I mean, that
yeah.
alone is a massive driver. So
And
so
I
it
would
doesn't.
imagine for most of these companies, because your primary business model here is your MSP business model on this slide, most of these companies, about what percentage of that of their revenue is in that managed services bucket?
On average, it's about 50%.
Okay,
So yeah, it's really important. Projects you're going to see typically is going to be about project service is going to be about 10 to 15%. So it's material, but it's not as big.
sure.
T&M has been shrinking as more and more all-inclusive contracts have been getting sold. But yeah, definitely your most important of these is your managed service gross margin for sure
Yeah.
as an MSP.
So we do have a question that was in here. Harold was asking, well, first George was saying, thank you for your answer on that one on the previous question. He does use the benchmarking product, and so he's gonna dig into some of what you were just saying. So he appreciated that. Harold was asking, when trying to grow, you mentioned this a little bit before, but maybe dig into it a little bit more, Peter, is there a conflict of interest in investing in the business growth versus improving EBITDA?
No, those two line up very well. And in fact, best in class today invests about 14.5% of gross margin dollars in sales and marketing. So roughly 10% of gross margin dollars in sales and about 4.5% of gross margin goes into marketing. And so that's an interesting one in our benchmarking. It's the one metric where you can be way off a best in class because you're spending too much, and you can be way off a best in class because you're spending too little.
Hmm.
Our advice is to always be investing in sales and marketing. And if you're a smaller MSP, that sales investment, by the way, is going to be a percentage of owner wages typically. So if you're an owner and you're the one doing sales and you're spending, let's say, 50% of your time out there doing sales, then you need to book 50% of your wages to sales wages because that's the more accurate measurement of your productivity. Um, but yeah, you should be investing in sales and marketing. It doesn't mean go nuts. We see a lot of organizations where they just go crazy. Be smart about it. Invest in the right types of marketing, invest in the right types of sales activities. And if you don't know what you're doing, make sure you're working with somebody who's familiar with the industry, knows what they're doing, and can help you. Sales is an area where I see a lot of small MSPs really struggle because the owners are typically very technically focused and they don't really understand what a salesperson does or um, uh, kind of find it a mystery a lot of times. And there's a science to managing sales and sales management. You don't want to just throw money at it and let somebody sit out there for months or years without any productivity. You've got to measure what they're doing every day and steps that are being taken towards driving sales so that it's not just a bottomless pit. But yeah, you should be investing in both.
Peter, on that I think you said 14.5%. So
Yep.
just be clear on that. Is that everything related to that effort? Is it salaries and your marketing spend, campaign,
Yes.
like it's
That's
all
an
of it?
inclusive number. That's looking at wages numbers and hard costs. So for sales, I think the breakdown on that is of that 10% of gross margin dollars, I think about 8 or 9% of that is salaries and wages, commissions, etc. The other 1 to 2% is other hard cost of sales. For marketing, it's about a 50-50 split. We see about 50% of that is going to be for wages, And if you outsource either sales or marketing, those outsourced costs should go into wages. You still, the what goes into marketing hard costs would be HubSpot and your website cost and all of those kind of things.
You,
So we've talked a lot about the bottom quartile and the top quartile, but there's this big 50% in the middle there. What's the advice if someone's finding themselves in that 50% middle spot, and that's where they just keep on trending there? What are the key levers that they can start looking at or start working on to be able to boost themselves up to that next level, that best in class level?
Yeah, the best advice, if I could reach through the screen to somebody who's median, grab them by the collar and just shake them till they wake up. Um, what we see generally with the folks that are median is they know what those levers are. They know why they're median and why they're not best in class, but they've accepted complacency. I had a member of one of our peer groups I was talking to about a year and a half ago. And at our May meeting, I saw their financials and they had an unbelievable Q1. And so I'm talking to them in May and said, "Hey, what happened?" Because they were consistently running about 10% EBITDA. They were doing fine. They were making money. But all of a sudden, they went up significantly over a period of a couple quarters to best in class profitability. And you could just see it in the numbers. You could see their service multiple of wages improve, everything. And he said, Peter, I, we were going to meetings every quarter. We were seeing our data every quarter, and we're hearing about all these other companies that are doing best in class. I finally got sick of it. We went back, and on the flight back, sat down. We sat down at the airport. We laid out a plan, and we spent the next month. We looked at every single customer's profitability, and those that were way under, we went back and did some increases. We lost a few in the process, but we came out of it way ahead. We looked at all of our employees. We had a couple of employees that were nice. We liked them, but they weren't getting the job done yet. We'd kept them around for the last year. So we made some changes there. We did all these things that we knew we needed to do, but we just hadn't been willing to do them. And we woke up one day, a month, it took those guys about 5 weeks to go through all that. They said we woke up after that. We had better quality customers. We had better quality employees. We were generating much better profitability. Life was easier. It was easier running the business. And they've never looked back. They continue to run really, really strong profitability. So if you don't know what you need to improve, reach out, start benchmarking. It's easy to see. But the big thing is the mentality. Don't be complacent. Understand that you can do better and be willing to do the things you need to do to get there. Life will life will be better for you when you do.
Yeah.
you touched on for just a second in one of the slides, you said, some challenges out there with revenue growth right now that's
Yeah.
I know we're looking at the profitability side, but what are you seeing in that whole universe? And what would you identify as some of those challenges?
Yeah, we've seen a slowdown on uh, particularly on organic managed service revenue growth. We've certainly seen a slowdown on all growth. Project revenue growth has been negative quarter over quarter for the last 3 quarters, which is a little concerning. That tends to be indicative of how the SMB economy is feeling about things, and seeing that quarter over quarter drop for 3 quarters in a row is something we pay attention to. We'll be watching that closely with Q2 to see if that marks a fourth straight quarter. If so, that'll be a sign that there's something really serious going on in the macro economy. Um, but overall, managed service revenue growth historically has run somewhere plus or minus 2% of 12% for years, going way, way back in our data. Then all of a sudden, COVID hit, and late 2020, we saw growth start to really spike, and it was running in that 20, 23, 25% range for a year and a half or so. Um, well, it's interesting though, and then it's come over the last 2 years, come back down. We're seeing organic managed service growth right now at about 10%. Okay, so it hasn't come down to negative numbers or zero or anything. We're still growing about 10%. In fact, last quarter was over 4%. That was a great quarter. Um, but what's interesting is even though organic managed service growth has slowed, profitability today is better than it was when we were running that really hot managed service growth. And the reason is because wage inflation has come way down. The reason that we were part of the reason we were seeing managed service revenue growth at 20% or so was that wage inflation was 10, 12, 14% during a couple of those years. So MSPs were turning around and they were increasing their pricing to keep up with that. And they weren't able to keep up with it. So gross margins were lower during that time. Profitability was worse during that time. So even though we saw this really cool peak of revenue growth and you see this drop and you look at it and you're like, wow, it must be really terrible right now. In reality, it's not. We're back to more of a normal growth rate and it's a more sustainable place to be.
Yeah, and you were saying that's around 10% currently. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, right now it's around 10%, which is a little on the bottom end of the range of what we've seen for a long time, but
Sure.
it's right there and it can easily, if we have a couple of decent quarters put together, we could easily see that get back up in that 11, 12% range.
For the people viewing, so the organic managed service the growth you're talking about like non-acquisition or what
Yes.
so
Yeah,
any efforts there?
yeah, we ran a data sample to come up with a clean number on that that pulled out our private equity folks from the data sample. And the reason is that their growth tends to distort our growth numbers because of acquisitions.
Mhm.
And the numbers are so big that they can taint our growth rate numbers. So we pulled them out and we ran a sample set and it gave us a really clean look at organic growth.
Very cool. Well, we've just got a few minutes left here, Peter. Tell anyone that's watching this, either here live or on the recording, you've talked about this report that we did, really, 5 slides out of 200 plus pages in that report, and then also benchmarking. So just take a couple minutes to kind of give your own pitch there of kind of why someone would want to work with you, of being able to get either this report there, kind of how they go about getting that, and then also the benchmarking piece of what you guys do.
Yeah, the report is great for understanding how the industry is doing. What is the industry doing on margins? What is the industry doing on some trends that we've analyzed in there? And so it's a really good way to understand what's going on in the industry today. If you really want, and so as a result, we sell a lot of those reports to MSPs and VARs, et cetera. But we also a lot of analysts buy them, a lot of folks that are trying to understand our industry, private equity firms, et cetera, buy them. And you can purchase that report. Again, it's at service-leadership.com. Or if you go to the connectwise.com website, you can click on the service leadership section and it'll take you there. Um, but if you're an MSP and you really want to understand how you're doing and how to improve, then you want to subscribe to benchmarking. And we also have a online coaching tool called Sleek, SLIQ, that will teach you operational maturity level practices. It'll first measure your OML as a business. You'll answer about 180 questions about how you do things in the business, everything from compensation to security and compliance and sales practices, pricing, etc. And if at the end of that assessment, it'll tell you on a scale of 1 to 5 what your OML is. And then it'll tell you how to get better. It'll provide you, there's hundreds of white papers, webinars, tools, and other things that are in there. And it'll even give you a prioritized action plan as to what you should work on. So you can get Sleek and benchmarking and our reports for $4.99 a month. Again, it's about a 70 or 75% discount these days, but the viewpoint of when ConnectWise bought us, the viewpoint was we're better off to get this out to the masses in a much larger number. So we already had a large data set, but the more MSPs that can benchmark, the better the industry will do. And if our industry is more financially successful and delivering better outcomes to customers, that's good for all of us. So we priced it at a price point that made it really affordable to anybody. So, and we're
Very cool.
happy anybody can reach out to us. We have a really good sales team. We can set up a one-on-one and just show you what that would look like. So no pressure.
Awesome, Peter. Well, this has been great content here today. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to be on here with MSP Success and with our audience. And for everyone there, service-leadership.com is the place to go for what Peter was just talking about. And Peter, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Rob. Is that a
All right.
Savannah Bananas
That
band
is.
behind you?
I think that one was we had them here. They sold out Nissan Stadium in I think 45 minutes of the football stadium
Crazy.
here. I didn't make it to that one. I did for another one, but we had Jesse Cole, the CEO and founder at our event there. But one of our
Yeah,
team
we had
members
him
grabbed that one and
2 years ago.
brought it to me.
He was the single best speaker I've seen at any IT event. Unbelievable. What a great story and what a fun guy. Plus, his guidance I thought was really useful for our industry on how to be more customer focused and innovative on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
They do a fantastic job. So yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Peter. I appreciate it. You have
All
a
right.
great
Thanks,
one
guys.
and we'll see you soon.
Anytime.
All right.
Sure.
Bye.